All right, everyone, our happy friends at the Legacy Media once again are trying to create a consensus of reality that is not actually true. If you look at the reporting on Puerto Rico right now, what you see across the MSM primarily is, oh, Trump is being universally condemned for going after the San Juan mayor. I think Carmen Cruz is her name. He's being condemned for this. Everyone hates him. Haha, this is the end of Trump. You know, it's like the 20th time that they've declared that since the election. They declared it a dozen times during the election, too. The Billy Bush tape will stop him for sure. Trump has gone one step too far when he talked about his hand size at the debate. Trump bullied Megyn Kelly. Oh, no, you know, we hate Megyn Kelly too because we're all primarily left-leaning, or supposedly, but now she works for NBC, so it's okay. That's the sort of shit that we've had to deal with from the MSM. Anyone noticing a little trend here? But in reality, if you look at Puerto Rico itself, I know that a lot of Americans, and this includes most of the leftists within the United States, don't really know anything about Puerto Rico. Hell, they couldn't find it on a map, and a lot of these people don't even realize that it's a U.S. possession, that it's a U.S. territory. A lot of them think it's a foreign country we're talking about. That includes most Democrats and most Republicans. We've got to get real about the fact that a lot of people in the United States do not know that much about other parts of the world other than the continental U.S. Hell, a lot of them don't know anything that goes on outside of their state for the most part. Now, those of us who analyze this sort of thing at this point for a living, I think perhaps know a little bit more, and hopefully, if you're a fan here, you're more knowledgeable too. Hopefully, you're researching some of this stuff on your own. You should. You don't have to do that from an MSM source. And literally thousands or tens of thousands of other sources of info in the world. Why the hell would you need to go to CNN or Fox or any of these bullshit artist places? I made a joke last night about Stephen King. He was rambling again about Trump. That he's qualified to be a journalist. He probably should join the news because he's used to writing fiction. Well, that qualifies him for a job at CNN or Fox or any of these other outlets. Yeah, go and work for it. You can make even more money that way, Mr. King. Just be a consultant. Go on there every week and give your 10-minute thoughts about, you know, how evil Trump is and how somehow magically things got so much worse. Like, the things you're bullshitting about weren't already in place largely under Obama. Well, if you were honest, you would have called it out at the time. Oh, well, surveillance is a problem. Obama's warmongering. No, it only became a problem when the person in office happened to be Donald Trump. Guess you don't like that. Guess he likes it even less. He called him, like, unhinged and violent and dangerous, which is funny given the subject material of Stephen King's own writing. And just think, Stephen King's not the most vicious out there when it comes to the literary content. He reads something like Rex Miller's Slob. It leaves Stephen King in the dust, honestly, for gore and depravity. But then we've got Angel Perez Otero, who is another mayor within Puerto Rico. And he's praising Trump, saying, oh yeah, the response is great. It's just that Carmen Cruz isn't attending any of the meetings here for disaster relief. She's too busy grandstanding on TV, and that's really her problem. She's trying to politically gain from Puerto Rico's misery. Yeah, that appears to be the case. See, the problem is that a lot of the pundits in the United States and a lot of the politicians are either convinced that Trump will fail, so they want to pile on board the Trump will fail bus for when that inevitably happens, according to them. They think he'll do a shitty job, probably get, like, forced out, be a disaster, he'll be a lame duck in his first term and or get impeached. So they're setting themselves up to benefit. Ted Cruz has done this. Lindsey Graham and John McCain do it on a daily basis, although I think for them it's more about defending their overseas interests than anything else, anything related to thinking Trump will fail explicitly of his own devices. And then there are those who want him to fail. It's not so much, well, we believe that he will fail organically, as they want to cause him to fail, because they think that it'd be a good idea to have a disastrous presidency. Like, it's going to be all posies and roses and bright sunshine and rainbows for everybody in the country if we experience substantial political upheaval. These same people will in the same breath say, oh, but the far right is so dangerous. So we want to destroy the only thing That's keeping them from being violent because we imagine them all to be violent individuals. Yeah, we want him to fall, by the way. We'll replace him with someone from the establishment and then a far-left Democrat. We'll get, like, President Sanders, which will never happen. President Elizabeth Warren. What a wonderful time that would be, by the way. It'd be a laugh a minute for me. I'd be sitting there talking about how dumb things were in the country. It'd be 4 years of nonstop foibles and follies. I think it'd be pretty funny, actually. Trump getting elected almost handicaps me because it's more difficult to find stuff that he's actually doing wrong. So much of it boils down to nothing more than clickbait and half-truths. There's not so much to report on, so I'm limited to, oh, you know, Trump was seriously talking about bringing back CIA black sites. Well, I oppose that. Trump's talking about further internet regulations for you know, whatever kind of content. Well, yeah, I'm going to oppose that. He has suggested that more than once. And that's a problem. It's a real problem with Trump that nobody focuses on. They're too busy talking about his supposedly botched Puerto Rican response. What more is he supposed to do? He freed up the money. He waived the Jones Act to get aid there more quickly. He sent in over 10,000 individuals to help with the relief efforts. At some point, we've got to say, Puerto Rico is dysfunctional, and they are incapable of solving their own infrastructural problems. Now, if this were anywhere else in the United States, if this happened in, oh, I don't know, say Texas, New York, and the same response was levied, a perfectly appropriate response, at some point, all of these pundits and politicians would be willing to admit that there must be a systemic problem with the response within the state because the federal government alone cannot actually solve the problem. It can give aid, it can give money, it can give supplies, it can streamline the process and oversee it and try to help out. But primarily the state needs to be able to care for itself. To some degree, there needs to be some sort of local response by people who actually live in those fucking communities. But with Puerto Rico, everyone boils it down to a racist argument. It's racist that everything's not magically peachy keen already. It's been like, you know, a week. Everything should be fine by now. It's Puerto Rico we're talking about. They've had systemic infrastructural problems now for decades. Partially because there's still a colonial question there. They're not privy to 100% of the aid and everything that other parts of the United States get. It is a territory. Now you can answer the colonial question, but you know what? In order to do that, I'm going to tell the Democrats something here. It's a little secret. If you really want Puerto Rico to be full statehood, full aid, everything else under the sun, electoral votes that'll probably, at least for a generation, be Democratic in all honesty. You got to solve the colonial question. But left-wing groups in Puerto Rico are the ones that are holding out. It's not the right-wing groups there that don't want to solve the problem. It's the left-wing groups that do, but groups that are too far left to want to embrace the Democrats. Literal socialists. Well, therein lies the problem. See, they're the ones sitting out the vote to muddy the waters. Ha ha ha. Now, what a wonderful time. And by the way, to some of these people on the right who say, well, if we admit them as a state, they become like citizens and stuff. They're already citizens. They can already, by the way, leave Puerto Rico, go anywhere else and vote. They can do that freely. They don't need a tourist visa or any specific process. They say, well, you know, I'm changing. I'm going to go be part of a different state. They're already citizens. So what's the fucking problem? I'm just not seeing one. Oh, the electoral issue. Not a problem. Demographic shift, it happens all the time. It's been happening all along for hundreds of years. It's going to continue. You may not want to believe me, but that's the historical reality. It's been happening all along. Okay. But Trump's response in Puerto Rico has not been a bad one. Him going after some opportunist mayor is not a problem. It's not hampering relief efforts. If anything, Carmen Cruz is hampering relief efforts, according to one of her fellow mayors within Puerto Rico. So why should I take her seriously and ignore this other person? And say, oh, well, you know, but Carmen Cruz there is such a wonderful, great person because she stands up against evil bully Trump who is trying to bully her on Twitter. Well, maybe it's because you're inept. Maybe it's because you're corrupt. Is anyone embezzling this relief money? Didn't they send a 3-star general there not long ago because there were tales that there was a mass ineptitude in the disaster response? Well, yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good idea to try to get something accomplished there. But Trump's got other things to do too. He can't just show up in Puerto Rico and start building houses for the next 2 months. He just can't do that. By the way, when Obama was largely AWOL, when disasters or other conflicts occurred, when he was golfing when there was some major diplomatic crisis, what did all these same people say? Oh, that's fine. But because he put out a statement on Twitter or on whitehouse.gov. So it's okay. Oh, he's the president. He's got other things he's got to do too, you know. If it takes him a few days to respond to some major issue, it's okay. Meanwhile, Trump jumps right on the Puerto Rican issue. In a couple of weeks, you know, manages to generally fix most of the problem. Power has been apparently restored to the outer edges of the island, which is where most of the population lives. A lot of tourist resorts and things. So that's been accomplished. I'd say that the response is hardly bungled. By the way, you've also got Houston still technically as a disaster area. There's still mass damage there, and nobody's even talking about it. Nobody's talking about anything but Puerto Rico, and the reason why Puerto Rico is being used here isn't because it's extra special in an economic sense. It isn't because it's extra special in any other sense. It's because Puerto Rico is perceived of by the left as like the holy grail of the United States because they imagine it to be populated by captive liberal voters. Well, they're going to be let down if it becomes a state. I'm going to tell you that right now. They're going to be let down. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get your 100% Democrat voter block like you want. If that were true, these people already would have largely left Puerto Rico, where the economy is shit, and gone somewhere else and become Democratic voters. But that hasn't happened, is there? I think there's a little bit of a strain of latent nationalism there, part of which gets rolled over into Americana. Again, most people think I'm wrong. The left and the right will conjoin on this, say, oh, Styx is living a pipe dream. Okay. You see what happens. Wait, like, 5-10 years or however long it takes when they inevitably do gain statehood or become fully independent, in which case they go bankrupt and become a pariah on the world stage, and probably get invaded by somebody else, colonized by China as a little bit of a tourist enclave like they're trying to do in Nicaragua and Panama. Watch what happens. Yeah, wonderful times for them. Yeah, we'll have 2 or 3 Chinese military bases and they'll pay us peanuts to have them here. But they swear they'll solve our problems if we accept them as our overlords. Parts of East Africa are learning that the hard way. Trump, meanwhile, he sits there, he does the best he can, and all anyone can do is criticize him. What more is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to liquidate the whole U.S. economy to prop the Puerto Rican economy up? Because Puerto Rico had problems before it got hit by a hurricane, widely reported on, systemic poverty, systemic unemployment, lack of infrastructure, high crime rate in some areas, a lot of political ineptitude and corruption. All these things were already happening. Now all of a sudden, Carmen Cruz is exempted from this. A politician. Somebody who's involved with that same ineptitude and corruption. All of a sudden, because Trump dares to criticize her on her side of the response, all of a sudden he's a mean, evil, despicable individual. See how it works? And then the same legacy media, they project as though it was universal condemnation of Trump. Nobody thinks that he did the right thing. Everybody condemns him for his Puerto Rican response. Well, no, that's not actually the case, including among some people in Puerto Rico, apparently. But this particular individual wants to get political discourse going so she can say, oh, evil Trump is responsible. She doesn't want to own up to the fact that the Puerto Rican government itself is largely responsible for the problems in Puerto Rico, because they have that semi-autonomy that they do have. It's the fault of the government of Puerto Rico. It's not the fault of D.C. Yeah, for once, D.C. gets to be blameless, which is really funny. Usually they're responsible for every problem in the country. Not in Puerto Rico, though. In Puerto Rico, a lot of it's homegrown. It's just, it's so dumb when the legacy media does this. And they think that people won't notice. That everyone, don't you think it's a little bit odd that all their headlines sound exactly the same too? Universal condemnation for Trump. Trump universally condemned. Evil, despicable, wicked, bigot Trump. Evil on Puerto Rico. Trump bullies another harmless individual on Twitter. Shame, shame, shame. I wonder where you got the idea from. I wonder if it was coordinated at all. Yeah, probably. It seems to happen an awful lot. They rip off one another's headlines anyway, but sometimes it seems a little bit more coordinated than that. Let's just leave it at that. That's about all. Peace out.